Okay, Jared, Jaleesa, and Jimmy from the Austin Stone, this is so great to sit down with you guys. Hey, we're talking about developing and discipling your teams, which is a big discussion. And I want us in this video to talk about what that means just musically. We're going to talk about ministry. We're going to talk about what it means to develop your team as a multiplier and grow your team. But this one, I want us to just talk about what does it look like to actually develop your team musically. I'm asking, are there some things that you guys have seen through the years that have allowed your folks to grow? And by musically, I don't mean just in proficiency on an instrument or vocally, although that's important, but also just the way that we engage the body. I mean, sometimes just my body language and my facial expression doesn't always communicate what's happening in my heart. So I'm curious, as you guys are thinking about all things music and all things that happen on that stage as we lead the body in worship, what jumps out to you guys? Jared, do you mind just starting?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the musicians that we lead with on Sundays, week in and week out, they're an extension of what you're called to as a minister of the gospel. And so just reminding them of that whenever they step on that stage, like there should be a weight to the way that they lead, and that they're not, people in the congregation are not just looking at you to lead them, but they're also looking at the musicians who are on stage. And so we want to lead out in that way with our countenance, with the way that we engage our people, but also with musical excellence. You know, like we should be, as musicians in the church, we should be the most skilled because we are pointing to the most excellent creator. Come on. You know? And so, over the years, like being real intentional with rehearsals, like weekly rehearsals, and not just like playing through the songs, but for us, like we rehearse transitions between songs probably just as much as we do the actual songs, because that's what keeps people engaged, you know, throughout the worship set. And so we work through that, and then we like to also just kind of make songs our own. You know, we don't want to just like, oh, we're going to do this song, we're going to play it just like the recording. No, we want to like, what is a way that we can maybe tweak this section of the song to make it our own, just to engage our people.
Would you speak to that right there? Because I think what you're talking about is just like local context.
Absolutely.
And that applies musically. I think sometimes we think we're thinking bigger picture, but just even how we play a song.
Absolutely.
Is that really what you mean by that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think just knowing your people, knowing your context, like sometimes maybe a full band setting is not the best. Like maybe just an acoustic guitar and keys could be the better, you know, setting for that, for whatever context you're in. Just knowing your people, and not all songs like translate like from congregation to congregation. I mean, we've seen that in our own church. Like there's certain songs that work better at different congregations than maybe they would at the one I'm leading at, you know? And so,
and even like work better for different people. Like there's songs that you lead that I'm like, nah, I ain't doing that. It might go vice versa.
Totally.
You know, it's just like, man, I don't think I can lead that.
Absolutely.
I don't have a conviction towards that specific song.
Yeah. And I try to sing like you. It just
we all do.
I gotta lower that. I gotta lower that key.
Let's bring it down.
Full step. Jaleesa, what about you as you're thinking about this, the team that you're leading?
Yeah, honesty was the first thing that came to mind. I think being really honest about what your expectations are of the people that are on your teams feels really important. I can think of seasons of my leadership or someone else's leadership that I've been walking with where a lot of their frustrations have just come by way of not being clear of what they expected from the person's rehearsal time, or not clear about what they expected for the person's posture on stage. And we try to remind our bands of this, but it's whether you like it or not, people view you as a spiritual authority in their life just by way of you being on stage.
That's right.
That's not necessarily fair, but it is the way that it is. And so what does it look like to steward that really responsibly? So I think honesty, you know, from the leader to the musicians, but then also from the musicians to one another, I think is really important. I see, well, first, I think we have to remember where people actually are in their musicianship. There are going to be some songs that I may want to lead, and there might be folks who are on stage with me, and they're just not in the place to be able to do that yet. I want to lower the barrier to entry and say, like, we can table that until we're all comfortable playing these versions of the songs as they're recorded, and as we get familiar with each other, and you get more confident in your skill set, then we can get creative together. other to kind of build trust.
That's so good.
So I think even honesty amongst the musicians of like, I like to step back and say, I don't think we're agreeing on the progression in the bridge. What do we think? And let them kind of talk about it and start to build that camaraderie with each other where they can lean on one another and learn from each other.
Totally.
You know, so I think honesty all the way around. This is what I expect from you. This is what your fellow band members expect from you. And then what do you expect? You know?
Yep. Have you had instances, I'm curious if any of you guys have stepped in where you just had like just over players? Because sometimes we're not just talking about growing as musicians and skill set. Sometimes people come with some skill set and you're like,
absolutely.
I need you to dial that back. Can y'all think of moments where you've had to step in and go, hey, I love what you're doing, but it doesn't fit what we're trying to accomplish here?
I mean, that even happens in my band now. And whether it be my drummer, bass player, whoever, it doesn't really happen with Keys guy too much because he's kind of like in the zone. He's also my MD, music director as well, so he's always in the zone.
He stays in his lane.
Yes, he stays in his lane. But as far, even like with bass, there are moments, I forget what song, it might have been How Deep the Father's Love for Us. And we're playing it, and we were doing our like just normal run through on a Sunday morning, and he just started going. I was like, nah, bro. I don't think that's gonna fit with this song. That'll work well with a different song that's more upbeat, got some movement, you know. That'll be really great. But for this song, nah, man, that's gonna be a distraction more than it is gonna be helpful. You got to think of things that help.
I think about teams that are watching this, and that's just a real thing because part of it is just understanding. Again, back to context, like not only local context of my individual church, but like I am tasked with leading people and inviting people. So what I can play or sing isn't always what I should.
Absolutely. I think Jaleesa was touching on this, and Jimmy said it a little bit, but there should be a sense of like community within the band and just a trust of each other and an honesty, but also in the way that you serve each other by listening to different parts and being like, oh, well, he's playing this part, so maybe I should be a little less busy here. You know what I mean?
Cohesion and collaboration, man.
I love that. That feels like an issue that pops up no matter if you're at a church of 100 or a church of 10,000. Just awareness of what is happening on stage. I'm even thinking, I'm curious, I mean, I'm sitting with some pretty good singers right now. I'm curious if you guys, because though I didn't have a big range, I had like an interesting voice, and on my ad libs, I thought, this is what the church needs to hear, you know, all of my ad lib moments. And so part of me growing as a musician was to go, that's just silly in the context that I'm in. Why am I doing that? I'm curious. We were talking about teams, but now we're talking about us. I'm curious if that has hit you guys like, hey, I need to check how I'm approaching a certain song, and I'm not just enjoying this for me. Does that hit you guys?
I would say yes. I mean, straight up, just for me, like when I came to this church, I had not like really been a part of a mostly predominantly white church. So like coming into this context, for me, I'm like, man, one thing I learned is that I want people to follow me. So if I start doing all these runs and doing all this other stuff, they probably won't follow me. And when I'm at home and I'm doing that, it's fun, it's awesome. But there was a season where that was not okay. But now I feel like there are moments, and I moved to another season where some of the ad libs point right back to the song. And they actually help people in worship rather than, because my focus back then was like, I wanted to hear a hoop and a holler. It was more about me rather than people actually like joining in with me and worshiping. Instead, kind of giving me a standing ovation or a clap.
But you're saying now, I mean, there's a little bit of strategy, for lack of better words. Like I want to be
Definitely
strategic here.
It reminds me of in the Psalms where you see, the word Selah. Like your ad libs remind me of those moments where it's like a musical pause. Like let's just reflect on what we just sang together.
I love that. Would you speak to, unless you have another thought, say whatever you want. Would you speak to just like body language? And again, we mentioned facial expression. And I'm realizing now that I'm getting older, I'm realizing my younger self was kind of just locked into, I was so focused on, again, I think hoping that we would deliver something excellent and be honoring to the Lord, but there was nothing inviting about some of my stage presence.
Yes.
Do you guys
Yes.
have conversations around that, especially as you
Yeah.
onboard? You know, if you got new folks coming
Yeah.
in, do y'all talk about that?
Yeah, 100%. And I think it's slowly drawing people out of themselves because I do think people feel really self-conscious on stage a lot of the time, or because they don't want to be looked at, they're just kind of doing this thing, you know, and you
Yeah.
get to kind of, as
Yeah.
their leader, get to draw them out a little bit.
Yeah.
But we have some pretty fun conversations about like, you know, people think you look mad.
Yeah.
Like, what? I didn't know that I looked, you know. So especially I lead in a high school gym is where my church meets, my congregation. And so we talk a lot about like, how would you invite the person at the very top of the bleachers? Like they're at the very back of the room. Don't overdo it in a sense that it's fake, but how can you present yourself in a way that's invitational to the person you can't even see their face. They're way at the back of the room, but you want to invite them into what you're celebrating. And I like to put in front of my congregation just the reminder of, you guys go to concerts and lose your mind.
Yep.
You go to sporting events and you go crazy. And last time I checked, none of those experiences raised you from death to life.
That's right.
Like last time I checked,
Come on.
Let's go,
last
Jay.
time I checked, y'all did not leave that thing being like,
Yep.
I'm so thankful we went to that game. They crushed sin, Satan, and death back there. Like that didn't happen.
Yep.
And so when you guys come into this gym, let's remember, like this is not just like a celebration. That's a shadow of who Jesus is and what he has done on your behalf. So how do we respond to his presence?
That is so
like
good.
enter his gates with thanksgiving and
Yep,
loud
that's
praises. Like we get to do that here. So just trying to invite people into a freedom of expression. I think even people in our congregations, people on stage, the same. You just get so focused on how you're coming across. And Jesus is like, you don't have to worry about how you're coming across. Like, I cover you now. And so you can just come into my presence with a little bit of freedom and a little bit of joy. He came to give us life abundance. So I want people to enter into that freedom.
Bringing that
Preach
heat.
it.
Come on now. That'll preach right
Amen.
there.
That is so good. I want us to wrap up because I think I'm thinking of churches across the country that are watching this, and I'm thinking about. I think rehearsals come up a lot. You've mentioned a couple things. You mentioned something really interesting about, hey, there may be a moment to let the band just discuss. Like, hey, is there a discrepancy in the bridge progression? Let's just stop it. Let's maybe have more of a conversation instead of the whole, I'm just going to drop the hammer on them all. You mentioned some about rehearsing transitions. I feel like that's a big conversation.
Yes.
Would each of you just give some thought right now? Is there anything else about the way that you have rehearsed your bands that could be fruitful no matter what size church? And again, you've spoken to some of it. Is there one thing that stands out that goes, man, this has been really helpful? And that can be both musically or even just the way you lead them pastorally and spiritually. Anything come to mind? Anybody want to start us?
I think that Jimmy should share how he does his rehearsals.
What you about to tell me? All right. I had something come to mind. I did have something come to mind.
Yep.
And if I don't say what you think I'm
Okay.
saying, I'll say it. You just tell me.
Great.
But one thing that I started probably 10 years ago, maybe 12, is I just put a focus on prayer. And whenever we first get there, there's a lot of hustle and bustle. Everybody's getting their instruments checked and all that stuff. But once everybody's settled, I gather everybody together and we sit in a circle or just like sit together and all of us kind of looking at each other or me just sitting up front. And I'm like, all right, here's some announcements, all that stuff, what you need to know. And then I just ask, all right, what's a praise and what's a request? We'd love to hear how you're doing and how we could pray for each other. Sometimes there's a few, sometimes there's a lot. And I've always told my band, I don't care, like this is way more important to me than us learning songs.
Yeah.
Like I want to make sure you love Jesus and your heart's in the right place.
Yes.
And I want you to know I care about you and I want you to care about other people. So even after you share what you're going to share, somebody in the band's going to pray for you.
Yeah.
And it feels so good to be prayed for,
Yeah.
and it feels so good to pray for others, and it does something to you. I mean, it does something to you even as a like a band culture and all the areas in which like we as a band lead together. It does something in all of that. So
Yeah.
for me, I just thought, man, prayer is the most like crucial piece of our rehearsals. So that's why I implement it. It's the first thing that we do. And sometimes it's 15 minutes, sometimes it's 30, 3 times, it's been the whole rehearsal. And I have to be a man of my word. Where I'm like, all right, here we go. And in those, there were a lot of tears and a lot of stuff that was going on that we needed to just talk through.
You tell Pastor, hey, Sunday's gonna be rough.
Yes.
But we are
prayed up.
Yes.
Prayed up.
Yeah.
But what's funny though is that Sunday was incredible.
Come on.
Yeah.
Because the bands felt so cohesive. They all worked on everything during the week, and they were just like in it. We were locked in. I remember those Sundays, and they're some of the most powerful Sundays we've ever done.
I mean, in all seriousness, it is hard to be petty about bridge discrepancies
Yes.
and just things that
Absolutely.
things that annoy us in a rehearsal. Anybody else just feel like sometimes I just get annoyed in a rehearsal, and it is my flesh.
Totally.
Absolutely.
It's really hard to do after we've prayed over one
Amen.
another.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I love that. What about you, Jared?
I feel like it comes down to the planning phase for me of like where do I want to take my congregation, you know, and what's the ebb and flow. There needs to be an ebb and flow to the songs that you're planning. And then in rehearsal, we'll get together, and somebody mentioned this, but I try to have just buy-in from every band member, like try to get their input on something. Like last week, for example, we rehearsed the song Praise by Elevation, and I feel like we played it like 3 or 4 different ways, and we're like, okay, what'd y'all think about that? How did that fit,
good.
you know? And so
Yeah.
we're just like workshopping a song.
good. I love that.
And then usually for rehearsals, when it comes to Sundays, we're running every song. I like to do every song like by itself first, and then we'll go back and work through transitions and
Put it together.
like do let's
we
do
do
the
too.
last chorus of a song and then get into the next song.
that.
How's this gonna flow? And then for me, I'm thinking through, okay, what am I gonna speak like over this moment, or how am I
Yeah.
gonna lead my congregation through this? And so.
Yeah.
That is so I mean, that's that is just so practical.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I think even and you know, a lot of us have done this for a while, but sometimes I'm just like, man, we got to run through it. you know?
Yeah.
Yep.
And to be able to go, okay, song by song, now let's put it together. Now I'm thinking through. Really, really helpful. Jaleesa, anything come to mind in terms of rehearsal?
Yeah, I mean, I often tell my band we rehearse at 6:30 in the morning. I know you do the same. I
Yeah,
did it
we
this
do.
morning. So I will often tell them, we're not here because I think you don't know how to play Worthy of Your Name. Half of the reason that we're here is to hang out.
Yep.
You
Yeah.
know, so
Be together.
and we've had such great moments in rehearsal of like praying for someone who lost their job, and then
Yeah.
you know
Yep.
6 months later getting to celebrate when that person gets a new job.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
A guy in my band just got engaged. We get to have a
Yep.
whole conversation about that before we run. It's just those moments of we may not see each other every day throughout the week, but I want to know about your life, and I want to feel like a unified part of this team before we step up to lead
Yeah.
our church. Because
Yes.
every week we get up there and we address everybody in the congregation as a family, and we're like imploring them to be a part of community.
Yep.
I don't want to be standing in the opposite of that when I'm telling them to do that. I
Yep.
want to be like, I
Yeah.
know the benefit of that, and I've seen the fruit
Yeah.
of that, and we're an example of that.
Yeah.
So half of it is just
So good.
hanging out with each other before it is getting into the music.
There's something so special too about like leading worship and singing a song and being like, wow, I'm singing these lyrics right now over my bass player because I
Yes.
know what he's experienced
Yes.
this
Yeah, yeah,
last
yeah.
week.
That's
You know what I
good
mean?
too.
Yes.
Like you're not just ministering and pastoring the congregation, but you're like, wow, I'm praying these words over the guy who's playing bass right behind me.
Yes.
So good. This has been fantastic. Thanks, y'all, for this conversation.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah.